Murmuring, complaining, strife, unbelief, hostility, opposition, anyone that has to deal with those on a regular basis, it's enough to wear you down. Moses had to deal with that for years. Welcome to the Word for 2021, and today we're in Exodus chapter 17. Moses was being worn down by the people already. In verse 4, he goes to the Lord and he says, "What am I to do with these people? They're about to stone me." The people were full of ingratitude, disbelief, and disobedience, but they were directing all of that to Moses. In reality, God saw it as against himself. It says in chapter 16, verse 7, God, looking at all the complaining, he says that they are complaining against me. Moses even relayed that to the people in chapter 17, verse 2. He said, "Why are you quarreling with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" People were looking at Moses instead of looking towards God. Moses didn't do anything. God did everything. God told Moses what to say and what to do. Moses, he was simply the messenger. He didn't write the mail, he just delivered it. And like a waiter, he simply served what the chef has prepared. The waiter, the mailman, the messenger, they're simply servants. They're not in charge. God has been in charge all along, but the people were looking to Moses and not to God. There's a reality that we need to understand as we're going through the book of Exodus, and that reality is this. Whenever spiritual leadership, those that God has set in place, those that God has chosen, when they are attacked, when they're fought against, when they're opposed, the reality is, because it's God's choice, you're actually attacking God. With that reality, there's two challenges though. For leaders, the challenge is this. Make sure that you are not misrepresenting God, that you are not disobeying God or leading the people astray. And the challenge to people, do not touch God's anointed. Do not dishonor the authority that God has set in place. How did God deal with all of this grumbling and complaining? Well, God elevated, he validated, and he confirmed Moses as the leader of his choice. He used Moses again and again, and he worked through Moses. I came across a list that a pastor had put together. It was called The Pastor's Plight. Pastors are in a very precarious position. They can't please everyone. It's said in this list that if a pastor is too young, he's seen as being inexperienced. If his hair is too gray, then he's too old for the young people. If he preaches from notes, some people say that his sermons are dry or they're canned. If he doesn't preach from notes, then he hasn't studied enough and he's not deep enough. If he suggests improvements to the church, he's seen as a dictator. If he doesn't, then he's seen as simply a figurehead. If he condemns wrong, he's called cranky. But if he doesn't preach against sin, he's called a compromiser. If he fails to please someone in the church, then he's hurting the church and he needs to resign. Although, if he tries to please everyone, he's seen as a fool. If he preaches about money, then he's worldly. But if he doesn't preach about spiritual giving, then he's failing to develop the people. He's always between a rock and a hard place. In fact, according to the Pastor Care Network, a survey was done of pastors, and this is how it came out. 80% of pastors surveyed said that they believe that ministry has negatively affected their families. 33% say that ministry is an outright hazard to their families. 40% report a serious conflict with someone in the church every month. 70% say that they do not have a close friend. 50% have considered leaving the ministry in the last 3 months, and 50% of those called to full-time ministry drop out after 5 years. And 94% of pastors surveyed, they said that their families feel the pressure of being in ministry. What I'm sharing with you is not so that I can be self-serving. I know that a number of people listen to the Word for 2021 that don't go to my church, but I'd like to encourage you to support your pastor where you are at. We read in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 12 and 13, "Now we ask you, brothers," Paul says, "to respect those who work hard among you, who are over you in the Lord, who admonish you. Hold them in the highest regard and love because of their work. Live in peace with each other." How can you support your pastor? 3 things. Number 1, pray for them. Number 2, support them by helping, by coming alongside and saying, what can I do to help? And then 3rd, be loyal, because we're all in this together. God has called each of us to do a job. We are his hands and his feet. We're not to attack one another, but we are to serve alongside each other so that God is elevated and Jesus is lifted high. Support your pastor. Thank you for joining the Word for 2021.